So, welcome to Module 2, Entrepreneurship and Business Models. I will share some slides that I have prepared to cover this topic. We will watch one or two clips on YouTube together. And at the end, I hope that we have a few minutes left for discussion and feedback and questions. But I would like to start with the main content now. Give me a sign if you can see the slide set. Maybe
Yes.
both hands. Thank you. How do you start a business? What's important for starting a business? First of all, developing an idea. Sometimes ideas come very spontaneously. Sometimes they grow out of a course that you may take at university. But just to have an idea is a starting point for a company foundation. It's a bit like a project, and most of you probably have had project management in a course program in some form or the other. But when you develop a business idea, it's like any other project. You need to consider the time, the money, and the scope of what you're trying to develop. So there are certain questions that you should ask yourself. You should ask yourself, what is the product or service that I am willing to contribute? Who are going to be my customers? Is there a market for this idea that I'm having? What do I have to consider in terms of production? Can I produce it in a way that I can then sell it with a profit? Because at the end of the day, any and all business is about economic activity and making a living off of it. And then, of course, there's the good old timing question. When and where will I enter the market, and how much time do I need to prepare everything? Now, when you develop an idea, you have to make certain decisions, and each decision has an impact on the final stage of your idea development. And the final stage is the decision whether or not you found and operate your company or not. So while it may be very tempting to spend all your time and energy on developing your idea, developing your product, developing your service, you should not underestimate the effort that you need to, the effort, time, and energy you need to put into solving other questions. And these questions are legal and economic basics that you need to understand, that you need to pay attention to as well. Because the framework in which you operate is very important for the success of your business. And the framework and how it functions, those are key instruments that have impact on how your idea pans out. Now, there's certain steps that need to be covered. And yes, having an idea is a wonderful thing. Sometimes it may not be you who has the idea, but you may be in a circle of friends where someone else has an idea and you actually have something valuable to contribute. So not every entrepreneur works with ideas that they came up with. So networking is really important, because if you do want to work in a self-employed environment, you may also want to consider that someone else may be in need of something that you have to contribute. Then you have to think about how can this idea that you and your friends are working on be turned into a business model? What kind of mechanisms are there that can turn your idea into something that you can actually make a living off? You can start answering key questions regarding your business idea by working out a business model canvas, and we will look at a business model canvas in more detail later on in our lecture. And then this business model canvas can ideally serve as a basis for a business plan. And the business plan is something you will need at a fairly advanced stage of your development, namely when you are trying to find investors, when you're trying to find money, because founding is also a very interesting project in terms of finances. But there are certain questions that everyone should ask themselves at the beginning of such a project. So you should be pretty clear about the type of business that you want to go into. And I can only encourage you to take pen and paper, do something physical, and just work it out on pen and paper, and maybe work it out with a friend, go into dialogue, ask yourself, what problem or need does my product or service address? Now, try to think of your own idea in terms of being a customer. Always try and take the position of a customer and see if your idea has actually some kind of fulfills some need, addresses some problem. And then you should also ask yourself which social challenges this product or service may face. What do I mean in terms of social challenges? Let's say you invent a new means of for mobility, you should consider things like, is it economically feasible? Is it ecologically, does it have an ecological effect? Does it respond? Does it solve some society's groups problems? Does it correspond to a need? And who exactly is it that will benefit from your product or service? In business administration, we work with personas. We try to figure out who is the ideal customer for my product or service. And once you've established this, and I urge you to really think about this one hard, because a lot of young startups have this idea that their product or service is just valuable to everyone and anyone. And if you have this idea, then you need to think on, because if you correspond to, or if you think you have the answer to the world's problems, you probably haven't defined the problem close enough. There is always a customer segment. There's always customer segmentation. I can't think of a single thing that everyone needs at all time, in all age groups, all educational levels. So really, think hard who is going to benefit most from your product, and define this group really well, because this is a proper definition of your target group will help you a lot in terms of marketing, and not just marketing the product or service you sell, but also in terms of marketing your idea to finance financial institutions and investors. And the other thing that is, of course, very important to define and to understand is how much your product and service costs in terms of creating it, and how much you can ask customers to pay for it. Now, not every product or service is then a physical thing that you can hold in your hands and pass on. There's a lot of business models that offer services that are not as tangible as you may want to think of it, but there is, of course, always a cost of production, and there is a cost at which you can sell something. And how you attach value to something, thus how you attach a price tag to a product or service, has something to do with the cost of production, but it has mostly to do with how well you can fulfill a customer base's needs with this thing. The more people want to have this, whether it's, you know, something physical or some software or some service, the more they think they need it, the more they're willing to pay for it. So understanding the cost of production is not necessarily the basis for what it costs on the market. Is very important. Now, what is a promising business idea? I mentioned it before. It should definitely yield a clear customer benefit. So your target group needs to understand why this is a good product or service to have, why they want to use it, how it is going to make their life better. Then, of course, you need a sufficiently large market. It may be great to, you know, meet the needs of a dozen people, but that's not a good business base. So really look at how you can make this product or service accessible to a large market, and also make it attractive for a large market. Is it feasible? Is it profitable? Can you produce it in such a way that you can actually get it to the people? It's great to have a wonderful idea for teleportation, but, you know, is this feasible? Can you make it profitable? Probably not yet, maybe in 100 years from now. Here, item 4 says your business idea should show an innovative strength. I want to point out that this is not the same as reinventing the wheel. You can very well be very successful with improving an existing product or service. A very clear example is supermarkets. Think about supermarkets. If the second company who wanted to start a supermarket thought, well, this thing already exists, we don't need a second kind, we'd all be shopping in one supermarket. No, there is a way to take someone else's idea, someone else's product or service, make it better, make it different, add a small something new to it, and then be very successful with it. Very often, the first of something doesn't really have the success that a copycat has. Let's call it copycat, because timing is also an important factor, and sometimes people need to know something before they consider using or accessing it. So very often being second on the market with something can actually be of great benefit. First of all, you can already learn from the mistakes the first one made, and you can improve something that exists. Of course, your product or service should promise a competitive advantage for an extended period of time, for as long as you want to be in business. Competitive advantage can be that you position your product in comparison to the competition as either more economical or as qualitative, more as of higher quality. So market segmentation always has something to do with positioning your product or service. There's high-end, expensive, high quality, and then there is a lower end, maybe of lesser quality, but more easily accessible in terms of it being cheaper, for example. You have to ask yourself where you want to operate. And very often people also have this idea that they want to be the best and the cheapest at the same time. This is going to be very hard to reach. So really commit to the segment that you want to deliver. And any and all good businesses are in the end good teams. No one can do everything perfectly well. No one can be good at everything you need when you start a business. So being able to network, being able to find the right people to cooperate with, creating a really good team is a key issue that you will have to address if you think about going into business. Now, of course, what you want to develop is at the start of all entrepreneurial effort. You need to know, is it a service, is it a product, is it a procedure that you want to offer? And a very good test whether or not your idea is worth pursuing is trying to explain your idea to someone who is not an expert in the field. When we are at college, we very often are in this little expert bubble. We talk to our colleagues from our course programs or our professors, and to them things may be very clear, but the question is, can you really explain it to someone who's not an expert? You know, can you explain it to your grandparents? And can your grandparents recognize the worth of it? Can they position your idea in a way that makes sense to them and where they say, yeah, that could work? So if you can explain it to someone who's not an expert, if you can make yourself clear in terms of what it is you offer and how you think, the questions you have to answer is, what is it that I'm offering? How am I going to make money of it? And what do I need to do in order to realize it? So if you can make yourself clear in terms of these three aspects, that's a good start. And of course, you have to keep the customer or the potential customer in mind. If a lot of people think in terms of my company, my idea, my, but the successful ones keep in mind the customer. What does the customer need? How can I respond to the customer? No one goes into business to meet their own needs. If they go into business to meet their own needs, something is amiss. You go into business because you have uncovered an unfulfilled need, or you have managed to create a need. So basic criteria is, does it make economic sense, and is it technically feasible, and does it help a customer segment? And the customer segment it helps should be big enough to make it worthwhile to create your company. And a good point of departure when you explore your idea, when you work with your idea, is the business model canvas, because it gives you an overview of a business environment. It offers a simple way to estimate the value of a product or service for a potential market. It's not, you know, a big document with endless questions that you need to answer, but it allows you to get a quick overview of an idea, and it, if it's done well, can serve as a basis for a more detailed description. So it's basically a business model canvas is a tool with which you can brainstorm your idea from various angles, and you can brainstorm it in a way that shows you very early on in your business development whether or not the idea is really worth pursuing. Another point of departure could be a SWOT analysis. You know, what are the strengths of my idea? What are the idea's weaknesses? What are the opportunities that this idea entails? And what are some of the threats? So these questions should also be answered very early on in developing your business idea, because those are tools that on the one hand side you can use by yourself, but you can also use these tools in a small group. It's always good to communicate with others, to exchange ideas, to get feedback for your ideas, because some people who are not experts in your field may come up with ideas, questions, and feedback that can be very helpful, because when you are an expert in a certain field, you tend to assume a lot of things, and you are not you don't see things anymore with a certain distance, with a certain naivete, but the naivete may be very important when you want to answer basic questions. And questions may be as basic as, where do I get the money from? What is the value people pay for? Who are some of the key partners I need in order to deliver? A lot of studies have been done to find out why startups have problems. And the top 5 reasons are market problems. Now, that is something a young entrepreneur cannot always actively influence. Business model failure. There is a huge number of business models out there, and we will look at some of them later on in the lecture. But an idea may be very valuable, and if you select the wrong business model to deliver it with, it can fail. So you may want to go through it and try out various business models in theory before you decide which one to go for, because business models should really be complementary to your idea, and not every business model works for every idea. Now, poor management is, of course, always a threat. But what does it mean, poor management? Well, poor management very early on in small companies very often means that the team structure is not properly worked out. There may be, some startups are a bunch of friends who got together to go into business, and then they figure out, well, my partner doesn't really have the same ideas that I have. There's communication issues. Management issues seem very often like a bit of a luxury when you start a business, but really management is all about communication. And communication is very difficult even for people who study it. So a lot of threats arise from communication. Hang on, I see that someone has a question. Let's see if I can somehow access it. I'm always facing a problem when I explain my business idea to other people, as we cannot work alone. And we always realize the importance of networking and teamwork. But what I face is that other people take my business idea and they imitate and compete with each other. I mean, they stole my ideas. Okay. Yeah, who do you talk to about your business idea? If you find that your business idea is being stolen, then that's something you can really not prevent. But when I said talk about non-experts in the field about your business idea, I meant people who are in your family, who are your family and friends, who you trust, someone who is not working in this field. Because yes, you don't want your business ideas to be stolen. On the other hand, you need some kind of feedback from people so that you know that you're on the right track. And if you, I mean, you shouldn't explain things in such technical detail that someone else can steal it from you. You should take the idea and basically sell it to a potential customer. Do I make myself clear? Can you? Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Yes, clear. Yep.
So yes, don't talk to your potential competitor, or, you know, if at all possible, find out who also is in the field, and maybe you can find a way to collaborate. You know, this is a bit abstract maybe now, but basically, very often, you know, it's better to work together with someone who is also in the same field, because combining strengths can actually make the idea more successful. Then we have running out of cash. Finances, mathematics. If you are not good at it, you know, get someone into your team, and, you know, have someone who is good in finances, someone who is good in business administration help you. Putting together a small team may also seem like an enormous task for a young entrepreneur. But it is very important that you have someone who covers the areas that you're not good at. And it's better to involve family and friends, ask them how to run certain things, than to try it all on your own, because that's definitely going to be difficult to then manage basic business practices. And running out of cash is mostly something that has to do with charging expenses wrong, not having a clear understanding of what it means to have employees, because employees can be a big cost factor. So you can have various reasons why you run out of cash. You can have a poor financial plan to start with, but normally, you know, if you have a financial plan and you go to any of the resources that you should have covered in Module 1, when we were talking about your various startup ecosystems, there is organizations that check your financial plans. There is professionals in every country that work with startups that can check that you are financially solid, that your plan is reasonable. And of course, product problems can also be an issue, but we're not going to dwell on how to fail. We're going to look at what you can do to be successful. So, very important, have someone on your team who understands business administration, someone who understands logistics, someone who understands finances, someone who understands everything that you science people normally don't worry about. It may be very, it may be a somewhat unusual approach to work with someone from a totally different field, but look at it as combining strengths. Proper market analysis is one of the issues that is very important. Know who you are going to sell to and which approach you take to selling. Try and find out what your target group actually really wants. You know, you may come up with a good idea and then find out, well, my target group may not understand what it is I'm selling, or I do not understand what my customers need. Have a unique selling proposition. Have something that a selling proposition is something that makes people want to buy your product or service. Always stay open to improvement and change. Analyze what you're doing continuously. Stay on top of new developments, and try and incorporate change as much as possible, because those who adapt in their business to market needs are those who end up being more successful. Yeah, ensure that you have a good mix of skills on your team, and understand and work through financial bottlenecks. If you start a company, you may need a few months or an extended period of time until you can actually sell something. So consider that in your financial plan. Allow for longer periods of investment rather than running out of money and having to stop. I want to share this video with you now. Hang on a second. And it's about how to run, what makes startups successful. Hang on a second. Share this now. So this is a video about a person who created lots of companies, who started lots of companies, who supported lots of companies in their early steps, and he analyzed what it takes to actually succeed. So this is a short clip of 6 minutes that may hold a few important pieces of information for you. And here we go.
I'm really excited to share with you some findings that really surprised me about what makes companies succeed the most, what factors actually matter the most for startup success. I believe that the startup organization is one of the greatest forms to make the world a better place. If you take a group of people with the right equity incentives and organize them in a startup, you can unlock human potential in a way never before possible. You get them to achieve unbelievable things. But if the startup organization is so great, why do so many fail? That's what I wanted to find out. I wanted to find out what actually matters most for startup success. And I wanted to try to be systematic about it, avoid some of my instincts and maybe misperceptions I have from so many companies I've seen over the years. I wanted to know this because I've been starting businesses since I was 12 years old, when I sold candy at the bus stop in junior high school, to high school when I made solar energy devices, to college when I made loudspeakers. And when I graduated from college, started software companies. And 20 years ago, I started Idea Lab, and in the last 20 years, we started more than 100 companies, many successes and many big failures. We learned a lot from those failures. So I tried to look across what factors accounted the most for company success and failure. So I looked at these 5. First, the idea. I used to think that the idea was everything. I named my company Idea Lab, and how much I worship the aha moment when you first come up with the idea. But then over time, I came to think that maybe the team, the execution, adaptability, that mattered even more than the idea. I never thought I'd be quoting boxer Mike Tyson on the TED stage, but he once said, "Everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face." And I think that's so true about business as well. So much about a team's execution is its ability to adapt to getting punched in the face by the customer. The customer is the true reality. And that's why I came to think that the team maybe was the most important thing. Then I started looking at the business model. Does the company have a very clear path generating customer revenues? That started rising to the top in my thinking about maybe what mattered most for success. Then I looked at the funding. Sometimes companies received intense amount of funding. Maybe that's the most important thing. And then, of course, the timing. Is the idea way too early and the world's not ready for it? Is it early, meaning you're in advance and you have to educate the world? Is it just right, or is it too late and there's already too many competitors? So I tried to look very carefully at these 5 factors across many companies. And I looked across all 100 Idea Lab companies and 100 non-Idea Lab companies to try and come up with something scientific about it. So first, on these Idea Lab companies, the top 5 companies, CitySearch, Cars Direct, GoTo, NetZero, Tickets.com, those all became billion-dollar successes. And the 5 companies on the bottom, Z.com, Insider Pages, My Life, Desktop Factory, People Inc., we all had high hopes for, but didn't succeed. So I tried to rank across all of those attributes how I felt those companies scored on each of those dimensions. And then for non-Idea Lab companies, I looked at wild successes like Airbnb and Instagram and Uber and YouTube and LinkedIn, and some failures, Webvan, Cosmo, Pets.com, Flues, and Friendster. The bottom companies had intense funding. They even had business models in some cases, but they didn't succeed. I tried to look at what factors actually accounted the most for success and failure across all these companies, and the results really surprised me. The number one thing was timing. Timing accounted for 42% of the difference between success and failure. Team and execution came in second, and the idea, the differentiability of the idea, the uniqueness idea, that actually came in third. Now, this isn't absolutely definitive. It's not to say that the idea isn't important, but it very much surprised me that the idea wasn't the most important thing. Sometimes it mattered more when it was actually timed. The last 2, business model and funding, made sense to me, actually. I think business model makes sense to be that low because you can start out without a business model and then add one later if your customers are demanding what you're creating. And funding, I think as well. If you're underfunded at first, but you're gaining traction, especially in today's age, it's very, very easy to get intense funding. So now let me give you some specific examples about each of these. So take a wild success like Airbnb, everybody knows about. Well, that company was famously passed on by many smart investors because people thought, no one's going to rent out a space in their home to a stranger. Of course, people proved that wrong. But one of the reasons it succeeded, aside from a good business model, a good idea, great execution, is the timing. That company came out right during the height of the recession when people really needed extra money. And that maybe helped people overcome their objection to renting out their own home to a stranger. Same thing with Uber. Uber came out, incredible company, incredible business model, great execution too, but the timing was so perfect for their need to get drivers into the system. Drivers were looking for extra money. It was very, very important. Some of our early successes, CitySearch came out when people needed web pages. GoTo.com, which we announced actually at TED in 1998, was when companies were looking for cost-effective ways to get traffic. We thought the idea was so great, but actually the timing was probably maybe more important. And then some of our failures. We started a company called Z.com. It was an online entertainment company. We were so excited about it. We raised enough money. We had a great business model. We'd even signed incredibly great Hollywood talent to join the company. But broadband penetration was too low in 1999, 2000. It was too hard to watch video content online. You had to put codecs in your browser and do all this stuff. And the company eventually went out of business in 2003. Just 2 years later, when the codec problem was solved by Adobe Flash, and when broadband penetration crossed 50% in America, YouTube was perfectly timed. Great idea, but unbelievable timing. And in fact, YouTube didn't even have a business model when it first started. It wasn't even certain that that would work out. But that was beautifully, beautifully timed. So what I would say in summary is execution definitely matters a lot. The idea matters a lot, but timing might matter even more. And the best way to really assess timing is to really look whether consumers are really ready for what you have to offer them. And to be really, really honest about it, not be in denial about any results that you see. Because if you have something you love, you want to push it forward. But you have to be very, very honest about that factor on timing. As I said earlier, I think startups can change the world and make the world a better place. I hope some of these insights can maybe help you have a slightly higher success ratio and thus make something great come to the world that wouldn't have happened otherwise. Thank you very much. Been a great audience.
Okay. Hang on a second. Close this window. Okay. So, timing. Can you think of two aspects that affect timing? From the example that we've just heard. What was the key issue why YouTube was a success and the predecessor that he had mentioned was a failure? What was the key thing? You can type into the chat if you'd like. What was the key difference between those two approaches. I think it came out fairly clearly what the big difference was. The preparedness, yes, preparedness in terms of what?
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, this is Zarina. So that's what I was thinking about. Like he was mentioning, when they launched Z.com, it failed because the platform and the internet wasn't really ready. So the market wasn't prepared for that platform where the idea was amazing. So the infrastructure wasn't there. That's why the whole business model failed. However, YouTube entered, like, and we know YouTube is part of the Alphabet group, the Google. So of course they also build infrastructure, and then they entered the market and it went smoothly for them.
Yeah, so technological readiness was the key issue, really, when you think about it. There was technological problems that made C.com fail because certain things that were needed for it to succeed did not exist yet. So yes, if you have an idea, figure out what it is the customer needs in order to actually use it. And if the customer needs broadband internet for it to work, and there is not, and broadband internet may exist already, but isn't very widely distributed yet, maybe a good idea to hold off on it. But it also is the other aspect was socially. Is the market in itself ready to accept a certain new idea? He mentioned Airbnb, and the thought of people renting out places in their own home used to be kind of odd. And then the recession hit, people were looking for new ways to make money, and then Airbnb started to become a success because it was a platform that offered people the opportunity to still keep their home and by renting out affordable space. Uber. Why is Uber so successful? Because people like to have new cars, but can everyone afford the new car they'd like to have? Some of them can now, thanks to Uber. They can have a new car and work as Uber drivers and help offset the cost of their cars, for example. That's how Uber started making rounds in the taxi business. There is one aspect that was very difficult for Uber to overcome. Do you happen to know what was the problem for Uber in many countries? Uber is basically offering taxi services. Yes, Joanna? I see you raising your hand.
Yes. So if we're talking about UK and maybe specifically London, the problem was that the taxi drivers were supposed to take these very big tests, and they were supposed to remember all the streets on their own, and the preparation for the test, it's, I don't know, a couple of months, a year, so long time. And with Uber, it was super easy. Like everyone could become a driver, and they were just taking their jobs.
They were taking their jobs, and they were also in conflict with certain regulations, like as you said, the taxis in England, and especially in London, were a very special service group that required a lot of training, that had very strict tests. So they were, of course, interested in keeping this segment of the market of transportation limited to people who actually also had a special training. So by Uber coming in and letting everyone be a taxi driver, it was a threat to the existing system. There's very strict regulations in some countries for people transport. And in all these places, Uber had a really hard time taking hold. But I don't know about the British taxi system right now, and if it's still as complicated to become a taxi driver in Great Britain. While it made sense to require your drivers to know all the streets in all of London, what type of technology undermined this requirement? Sarina?
So I want to make also a point to that.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of I remember one of my classmates, I think she was from China, and she said she had a study abroad in France, and when she arrived to France, she didn't speak French, and she was kind of like, how to say, like maybe a little bit overwhelmed. And then she said, thank God for the Uber. So all I had to do just enter my destination and don't even explain anything. And the option was there. And I remember like, I've heard that maybe like 6 years ago, and it still kind of like resonates with me. And I also like the Joanna's like fantastic point about the British taxi system, because it's quite famous, because the system kind of forces poor taxi drivers learn all the streets of London, and it's very complex. So at the end of the exam, when they pass, their brain actually grows a little bit more, because like they learn that very complex information.
Yeah, the part of the brain that is responsible for orientation is at a higher stage of development at the end of the training. Yes, that's a famous neuroscientific finding that's related to the British taxi drivers. Yes, but what technology do you think undermines this requirement for everyone to learn the streets?
So like even me, that's what I'm thinking. Every time when I'm using Google Maps, I'm not even trying to recognize the streets or my routes. All I'm doing is just like looking at my screen, walking around, and completely relying on technology. And that's why I think it's kind of like undermines our like those abilities to learn about orientation, the survival techniques. And I think for humans is very important.
Yes, but it's also very nice to have a technology that makes your life easier. So, you know, everything comes at a cost. But yes, having GPS in the car, undermines the requirement and having to know every single street. So therefore, the test may no longer be truly relevant. And it also opens up to other forms of transport, because you don't need to know, you just need to know how to use the technology that helps you out. Hang on a second.
And to have a car and driving license.
Yes, that helps. A driving license still helps. You shouldn't drive without one, that's true. So now we learned about timing and the importance of timing. We learned about ideas and how it can be better to just not come up with your own idea, but to come up with an improvement for an idea. Learned about the importance of teams, and the funding was comparably low, because there is a lot of money out there now, because there is a whole ecosystem for startups where people are looking at businesses, potential businesses, and looking to support them. But the business model is still an important aspect for the success of a business. And what is this business model? It is the logical operation of a business, and it shows exactly how you want to generate profit. So the business model is there to help you how you balance opportunity and risk and make profit. And some of the core elements of a business model are the value proposition. So what is it I am offering people here, and why do I think they are willing to pay money for it? What is their benefit, and how much money can I actually get for offering what it is I'm offering? And this is the same for products or services or procedures. There are on your CloudEARTHi course, there are 50 common business models, and you find explained how they work. You have this slide set that I'm presenting to you today also on your Moodle. So I encourage you to browse through the 50 most common business models, and we'll look at some of them in more detail here.
Alexandra, I have
Yeah.
a small question.
Yeah.
You said business model canvas. Is it a platform?
Yes. No,
or
the
is
business model canvas is a tool. It's basically a sheet of paper, and there's also one on our Moodle. I actually uploaded a business model canvas, an empty business model canvas on our Moodle, and the business model canvas asks certain questions, and we'll look at that later on in the course. In a few minutes, we'll look at an example of the business model canvas. Hang on a second. Here. So you'll see we'll get to it. But I want to look at a couple of business models that are very common. So people have an idea how to possibly generate revenue.
Are you sharing the screen, Alexandra?
Oh,
yep.
Yeah, that's the problem. No, I'm not sharing the screen. Now I'm sharing the screen again. So the business model canvas we'll get to at the end. But what are business models? Some that we're very familiar with are the subscription model, for example. So you pay for something that you never own. It's like renting a service or renting access to a service. We know how Netflix works. We know how Car2Go works. We pay either per use if we rent a car, or per period if we watch Netflix. At the end of the day, we don't own Netflix. We don't have a part of in it, but the service is there, and the company lives off of our contribution. The freemium model, on the other hand, is something where you have a certain portion of the available service, and then if you want more, you have to pay. So you, for example, LinkedIn, it's a very good example because a lot of us are on LinkedIn to establish our professional network. And if we then want to use LinkedIn in a more advanced way, we have to pay extra. And then we get other services that are possible, but not in the free version. So you have a free version and a more advanced version that you can then decide to pay for. And what are the benefits for people who run LinkedIn? Well, they get your data, and they can sell your data and make business with your data. And on the one hand side, you have this with a lot of video games. You have this with professional services like LinkedIn or Xing. And the idea is that you hook people and then get them used to a certain level of service and then entice them to use more. That's something we're all very familiar with. Free models. Well, free models only work because we as consumers are willing to share our data, and our data is then again sold to marketing companies. And we all are very readily sharing our data because we have an interest in using the service. Every Google search you run leads to you delivering data that is then, on the other hand, being sold to people who target you with certain advertisement. Then, of course, there's the marketplace model, eBay, Amazon. Airbnb is also a market, is sort of a marketplace model where people need to trade. It's like when you think of a traditional market, in Austria, for example, the traditional marketplace worked in such a way that the city who owned the streets got money from the vendors who decided to put up a stand where they sold certain things. And in the same way, the online marketplace functions. The person or the group who provides the service gets money from those who sell the items on that marketplace. So Amazon themselves doesn't produce anything, but they offer this hub where people can trade with each other. Access over ownership. I want to access transportation. I want to access housing. I want to access a hotel. So there is no need to own anything. It's again a way of bringing those who need something together with those who want to sell something. If you think of booking.com, it's a wonderful idea because when we travel, we don't know normally we don't know the city that we're going to. So if you want to find a place to stay, it's very useful to have a variety that you can directly compare. So it's giving the customer an opportunity to make a decent selection, and the people who run the platform get money from those who advertise on it. Very safe way to make money. Experience. Can you think of a company that produces something that has a very high level of brand loyalty? They may produce a product that is very similar to something else, but a lot of people will buy what is called the experience, the user experience with the item. What do you think I'm trying to get at? What company is really good at experience?
iPhone,
The iPhone,
Apple,
yes.
Apple.
Yeah, Apple. Apple has the experience model down to a science. Yeah, people are actually willing to pay more for a product because it promises an experience to come along with its use. Apple, Tesla are such brands. Now, the business model canvas is useful to show you, to give you an idea which business model would work for you. It helps you develop the idea. And when we look at how it's done, let's look at what it is first. So this is a business model canvas, and it is no more than this. It's a sheet of paper with certain squares in it and rectangles. And in these 9 slots, you have to think about certain aspects that are important for running a business. First of all is, who are you doing this for? And why is this first? Because the customer is really your reason for existence. Now, if you don't have a customer, you don't need your business. Secondly, of course, it's the value proposition. You wouldn't have customers if you couldn't deliver a value that they're interested in. Then, of course, you need distribution channels. You need to figure out how to get this value proposition to your customers. And only customers who are happy will be return customers. So customer relationship is the next thing you have to look at. How can you make your customer become a repeat customer? What do you have to offer for the person to come back and spend more of their money on your product or service? Revenue streams are very important. Where does the money come from? Where does the money come from, and where does it go? Resources are also an important aspect, especially in, the production sector. You have to think about what kind of resources do I need? What's the availability of the resource that I need in order to produce my product? Is there a do I have to use pure natural resources, or can I use something that is a result of recycling or upcycling? How can I work with my resources to make them be reusable or recyclable? Then you have to figure out key activities that your company has to engage in order to keep business running. That might be, some kind of marketing, or some kind of how do you keep your business going? Partners. Who do I need to work with? Who do I need to create something with? Who do I need to maybe sell my product or service? And then cost structure. What does it actually cost me to do something like this? And I had a really interesting face-to-face exercise with my students here in Austria a couple of days ago. There was a group who wanted to create a board game. And I asked them, we did the business model canvas basics, and they figured that board game should have a price of 30 euros. And then going through the canvas, they realized it was impossible to make it so cheap, because if it only cost 30 euros, they couldn't pay the people who needed to make it. They couldn't use the materials, the resources they wanted to use, because it was too cheap to actually use the high quality resources they wanted to put into that board game. So yeah, cost structure is an important factor that you should think of early on in the development of your business idea. And yes,
There is a question
hang
from
on.
Serena. Please, Serena,
Yes,
ask a question.
Serena, yeah.
Hi again, thank you. So my question is, we don't really speak about the ethical part of the business model or business ideas we're talking about, because I have this business idea for like 3-4 years already, and I'm very passionate about it.
Mm-hmm.
However, it's not quite popular field of industry, and it's not, so every time when I'm trying to kind of like lure the information or network with people, they kind of put me on the, it's not cool enough, and people
Mm-hmm.
following me, and they trying to stigmatize me, and
So you have you have an idea in terms of some kind of social business?
it's definitely part of the consumerism. So it's in the more, I don't want to say it because maybe
No.
I'm gonna be unwelcomed. Yeah, so it's quite famous, and it's I see how corporate America is majorly trying to control the field, and I see there's like a lot of opportunities, and I even see like there's a lot of opportunity actually to start growing on the this idea on Austrian market and introduce to the European market. So the idea is there. It requires a lot of money. It requires a lot of resources. But at the same time, I'm having struggle because every time I speak with people, they're like, oh, this is not so ethical. And
Okay. Well, if only ethical things had ever made it to the market, we wouldn't have a lot of things. Seriously, I mean, some of the least ethical things have the largest market success. You know, if ethics were a consideration in business, we wouldn't run out of natural resources right now. I mean, unfortunately, you know, ethics is not a key ingredient for business success. And yes, you know, there is nowadays a strong movement and in terms of social business and social entrepreneurship. But let's face it, there is nothing very ethical about Apple selling a customer experience. You know, this is a very if you want to go so far as to say, call it unethical, it would be it, because they're just charging people more for a phone because it's got an Apple on it, you know? So I think ethical considerations, while they are important in a lot of fields, are very often not the main consideration of entrepreneurs. You know, if you look back to the industrial age, ethics haven't really been at the forefront. Look at Amazon. Nobody would call Amazon an ethical social business, and they're still very successful. So maybe you need to find partners who understand, you know, I call it the relativity of ethics. Now, I have no idea what it is you're trying to do, but I just can think off the top of my head of 10 businesses that are not ethical in terms of how they treat their employees, or how they treat customers, or how they treat the environment. Yeah, it is very promising nowadays to come up with, you know, ways to create business in a more ethical way. And it's something I personally encourage, because I also firmly believe that we can't go on like this. But so maybe the challenge for you is to figure out a more socially friendly way of offering this. I don't know what it is, so I really have no idea. But largely, you know, ethics. Hannah, do you agree ethics is not a prime business consideration?
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And actually, yesterday we had a discussion about this, about Coca-Cola. The company Coca-Cola is the biggest company worldwide, and it's contribute of around 60% of the CO2.
Mm-hmm.
Just
Yeah.
this biggest company. So,
Mm-hmm.
you know, this is something against the environment.
Yeah.
So I completely agree. When you come to the business, I think now no one care about environment, about ethics, about these things. Maybe in the future, I hope in the future they will do, but now no. They just take care about how much we invest, how much we will get.
Yes, and I mean, part of our project here really is to encourage people to engage in more social entrepreneurship. So it's not something we would, you know, encourage per se, you know, to do something unethical, but also the reality of business is that its top priority is to create jobs and money, and to reward those who go into business for taking business risk, you know. Going into business is always also risk taking. And why do people do this? Well, the promise of success, the promise of profit is, you know, that's the reality of the ways of the world. But on the other hand, you know, we do have to look at doing more sustainable ways of business, because we cannot forever do what we're doing right now, because we'll run out of all kinds of resources. So yeah, Where do I start? Where do I end? Where do I want to become ethical and where do I not? How does Coca-Cola handle this matter of ethics? Well, Coca-Cola is one of the biggest, if not the biggest sponsor in sports. On the one hand side, they feed children and adults enormous amounts of sugar by giving them all these sugary drinks. On the other hand, they are a big sports sponsor, and the practice of this is now called greenwashing. And a lot of companies engage in greenwashing, especially large corporations, because they do realize that the customer attitude towards consumption is changing a little bit, and they do want companies, they do want to see companies do something that has a positive impact on the world, on society. I can just think of Kellogg's, for example. Kellogg's is a producer of sugary cereals, and they have been under criticism for that, and now they're sponsoring a meal free meal campaign in American schools, so to show that they also have some kind of social engagement. So yeah, while ethics is not a top priority in business, it is becoming more important, and I think that a lot of investors are looking at these aspects in terms of financing startups, because people start realizing that we're headed down the wrong way and they want to make a swing around now. And I have no idea, Sarina, if your idea has a negative environmental impact, or maybe is something that keeps children in front of the TV, or whatever it is that your idea is. But I'm very surprised that people are even pointing out to you that your business is not ethical. So curious to see what it is really. Did that answer your question, Sarina?
Yes, absolutely. The thing is, like with me, the business is, I've seen this business, and I'm very upset because I see how people with money like already growing in that industry, and I feel like the more research I do, the more kind of like a disadvantage I am. But at the same time, I feel like the industry is so big and it's so booming. There might be a place to enter at certain point. But
Yeah.
so far, the people I've spoken to, everyone was just like judgy and already labeling and things like that.
Well,
But it's been
sometimes.
around for like centuries, for sure.
Yeah, okay. Well then, I would look at it from a point of view of a business person. How can I improve my service that already exists and that other people are making lots of money off? How can I improve my service? And maybe even how can I improve it in terms of social responsibility? Maybe there is a way that you can figure out how to make this unethical business more ethical, and then have this advantage over the rest, because customers are looking more and more for ethical solutions. So that might be just this one aspect that you can add or change that gives you the edge to make it successful. But as I said, not knowing your business, this is just a guessing game. Now, that brings me to the next aspect of the business model canvas. When you do your business model canvas and you are looking to attract investors, they will look at aspects of sustainability, social impact. So when you have your first attempt at going through the business model canvas and your first attempt at answering these questions, go look at it again, and look at it again point by point and see if you can somehow positively influence it. You know, can I use recycled materials? Do I have to really use X amount of, I don't know, natural resources? Can I somehow change production to optimize it? Are there parts that I can reuse? Can I design the product or service in a way that it's more that it's easier to recycle, for example? In the computer industry, a lot of efforts are now made to make computers so that you can then, after you use them, take them apart more easily and more easily access the natural resources that are built into a computer to make new computers with them. So there's also a question of value proposition. Is it really something you need to sell, or could it be something that you can lease or rent? Can you go into a sharing approach rather than a consumerist approach? What are your distribution channels? Do you really need physical channels, or can you go online with your idea? What's the social component in your customer relationship? Are you able to connect with your customer? Are you able to give them a, make them feel good about using your product or service? Again, revenue streams. What can I reuse, refurbish, upcycle? Do I really need everything new every time I produce something? Do I take back old used items? So can I be my own scrapyard on top of my own production? And who do I work with? Who do I hire to make my components? Or, do I who do I rent my things out to? Do I have certain requirements in terms of my partners? Or is it the cheapest source for my components is the best? And this you have to then again look at in terms of cost structures. Does it make business sense to go with the cheapest component? Does it make business sense to maybe choose an ethical production line over a cheap production line? It all depends on the kind of brand you're trying to build. So it has to be conclusive. You can't claim to build high-end products and then go with the cheapest components. That will maybe work at first, but as soon as consumers notice that, the wrath of the consumer is the worst that can hit you. So position yourself, position your idea, look through the canvas and answer all these questions, if possibly, already with your team, because the more ideas you put into the canvas, the rounder the whole canvas gets. And of course, the SWOT analysis. The SWOT analysis should actually be something that you add to your canvas activity at the end and go through each individual item and do the SWOT analysis. What are the strengths of my idea? What are the strengths of my partners? What are the strengths of my key resources? What is the strength of my value proposition? And then again, also asked, and the weakness. I think the hardest part about coming up with a business idea and developing it is really to be very reflected and reflective. Take yourself out of it, because yes, you do need a lot of passion to go into business, but you also need to be able to distance yourself and look at it from a customer point of view, for example. Look at it from the point of view, take your own customer journey. Do you know what a customer journey is? A customer journey is you pretend that your product or service is available, and you pretend that you're a customer and you're accessing this. You're either buying the product or you're using the service, and you go through each individual step that the customer has to take to get to that value that you're proposing. And that also is a very useful way of establishing whether or not it's worth pursuing the idea, and where the points are that you need to improve, change, or adapt to a certain market. All right, opportunities, threats. You know, all these 4 items of the SWOT analysis, you should apply to your business model canvas, and then you can really see if your idea is something that is solid enough to make an effort to go out and, you know, look for investors, look for partners, set up a team, and really work on it. So, do you have any immediate questions regarding the slides we went through?
I don't have a question, but I have a comment. I would like to reflect on the last point that you said about put yourself on the same side as a customer, and I would like to say it again with maybe different words. When you try to build your business model, try to be realistic, because you know when you are coming with an idea, you will be very engaged. It's a fantastic idea. I would like this is the most brilliant idea. And when you start to build your business model, most probably you close your eye on the topics that will make your idea fail, because you dream and you feel that this is my best idea, this is the brilliant idea. So be realistic, and if you say, yeah, this brilliant idea is not brilliant, there is a lot of problems, the business model will not work, I think you are brilliant enough to bring another idea.
Exactly. So one key aspect that you should really work hard on is be your own devil's advocate. Always ask the question, but what if? But what if? So be your own hardest critic and judge. And then you will be able to uncover weaknesses. You will be able to uncover maybe wrong directions that you are thinking in. And that's, of course, in your own interest. You know, you're not trying to blind yourself to your own weaknesses, because we all also know that most startups fail. But what does it mean to fail? It means that you've learned a lot. So failure is also part of life, whether you are a student or a startup. We all learn from our mistakes much more than we learn from our successes. Remember the clip that we watched? He looked at the failures and the successes, and he said he learned so much from the failures. So yes, because the success is a really wonderful thing to have, and it's a wonderful thing to work for, but really it doesn't teach us as much as failure does. So what does it mean to fail? It means that you have to get up and try again. And you all have this mindset, because you all failed a lot in your life, and you have continued to work on it. If you watch a little child, how it learns how to walk, it falls down a whole lot. If it fell down once and said, oh, I'm not sure if this walking thing is made for me, I don't think I'll do that, we'd all be crawling around on the floor. So it's human nature to fail. It's human nature to learn from our failures. And so I can tell you from my own experience that I have gained in business. I did have my own company once, and I had it for about 5 years together with a business partner. And I then decided to part because the failure was, it was the wrong team for me. It did not work out in that team because we had different ideas. So sometimes you just have to realize that, you know, your time, your effort is not, you know, going into the direction that you want to go in. Take yourself back out, try again, or try something different. You know, none of the successful businesses was successful from day one. They all had their learnings and they all had their failures. And the difference between those who really succeed and those who don't is that those who really succeed just press on. So I would like to encourage you to keep on going, even if you have setbacks. That is very important for all aspects in life, not just for entrepreneurship, but it is especially important for entrepreneurship.
Yes. I can see there is a question in the chat or so, but I couldn't open the chat. So please unmute yourself and ask.
Sarina says resilience, yes. But it's more than resilience you need. It's actually not, because resilience just means you don't let failure touch you. You need to take failure, let it touch you and learn from it. You know, take it as a learning opportunity. All right, are there any other questions?
I think I completely agree with you, Alexandra. I think all of us are learning from the fail much more and much better than success. Because if you succeeded, this means that you have only one way. You didn't touch the fail. But if you fail, this means you will learn a lot.
Yep. And
yes,
as we say, live and learn.
yes, yes. And the second point is just a comment, general comment. It seemed to be that it's a long process to make the business model, like thinking and
Yes, yes, yes. But you should, I mean, the business model canvas can be done, you know, in an hour or two. Let me see if I can access it from our Moodle real quick. Hang on a second, because there is a good, I will try and share my screen again. Hang on.
but
Here it
why
is.
yeah, you didn't share the screen.
Hang on. I'm trying to look for the model canvas. Yeah, here it is. Hang on. Oh, where did it go? Here. Oh, should be. Here it is. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Yeah. You see that there is questions already for each of the sections in the canvas. And you basically just answer the questions, discuss these questions with those who you work with. And then, you know, and this is available on our project Moodle. So go through the canvas, look at the individual questions, but go through it in the order that you saw in my slides. It doesn't matter, you know, it doesn't make sense to go through it from left to right. You should really go through it in terms of starting with who are my customers, what is the value proposition, and answer these questions, fill it in, work through it. And it doesn't take very long. My students here did it in about 2.5 hours. and they became, and they did it in discussion.
Group.
So if you have
Group.
someone to do that with in terms of pair work or 3 people, it's much more valuable because you can actually already early on detect where you might have your separate ideas, where you go a bit off into the idealism of, you know, being in love with your idea, where you become less critical of yourself. So this is really an activity that I encourage you to do in pairs or, you know, in small groups.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks a lot, Alexandra. Actually, I will do it by myself today for an idea, stupid idea I had some time ago. So I will retest it again.
Okay, yeah.
Yep.
It's available on the Moodle in
Yes.
the folder Entrepreneurship and Business Models.
Yep.
So
Great.
I wish you all very successful business modeling.
Yep.
And
So
also
this
you
is
can browse through the various business models that are out there and maybe find something that is compatible with your idea.
okay. So this is the homework for us to make to fill this business model canvas.
Yes, and there's also an upload area for the business model canvas.
Okay.
So
Great.
if anyone wants feedback on it, I encourage you to upload it.
Super. Super.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Thanks
It
a
was
lot,
a pleasure
Alexandra.
having you.
Yeah.
And I will stop the recording now.
Thank you very much.